We all know that power creep is a serious issue in Pokemon. Every generation, Game Freak releases even more broken and comically overpowered Pokemon. And the old mons that have been there for years don't get any love, and eventually they just fall into obscurity, never to be used again. Well, in this video, I'm gonna combat that, and I'm gonna try to create the worst Pokemon ever. Now you might be asking yourself, what makes a Pokemon bad? Well, I narrowed it down to 4 criteria. Those are its move pool, stats, typing, and ability. These will affect how strong or weak a Pokemon is. Now luckily for us, we can influence 3 of these categories. You can alter a Pokemon's stats by using the moves Power Split, Guard Split, and Speed Swap. With these moves, you can modify every base stat except for the HP stat. Remember this for later. There are also certain moves that can modify a Pokemon's type. And finally, by using Skill Swap, you can also change a Pokemon's ability. And that brings us to the move pool, the only aspect that you can't change. It makes sense, considering that when you decide on your moves, it's before the battle actually begins, so you can't really switch up a Pokemon's move pool during the battle itself, Well, I guess unless you count Transform, but I don't really count that. Now it's time to choose a base Pokemon for this challenge. Considering what I mentioned earlier, an ideal choice would have a dismal move pool and HP stat, as those are the only factors that you can't alter. Shedinja might catch your eye initially, since it has 1 base HP, but Shedinja is actually not that great of a choice because of its stacked move pool. Like, look at this. Bug Buzz, Poltergeist, Shadow Sneak, even Swords Dance. Like, dude, this thing's move pool is way too good for this challenge. Onward to Magikarp, which initially does seem promising with its naturally terrible base HP. But then you remember that for some reason, it got access to Hydro Pump in Generation 8, which, again, is just like, way too strong. Then I saw it. Blipbug. Sporting an abysmal move pool, it learns a mere 5 moves in total, with only 2 being actual attacks. And yes, while it does learn Recover, given its below average base HP, and the fact that we're going to be lowering this thing's defense even more with Guard Split, I don't think that that's going to be too useful. So now that we have the move pool figured out, let's move on to the stats. Now, like I said earlier, using Power Split, Guard Split, and Speed Swap, you can alter most of the Pokemon's stats. And let's start with Power Split. It averages the user's attack and special attack stats with those of the target Pokemon. So to create the Pokemon with the lowest base stat total, we'll have to use Power Split on the Pokemon with the combined lowest attack and special attack stats. And of course, this happens to be Shuckle. And now let's do the same for Guard Split and Speed Swap. The Pokemon with the lowest combined defense stats is Igglybuff, and the Pokemon with the lowest speed stat is, surprise surprise, also Shuckle. Honestly, what a well-designed Pokemon. And now that we got the stats done too, let's move on to the typing. Unfortunately, there are only like a handful of moves that can actually change the typing of a Pokemon, and I did some research and I think that the worst type combo you could get using these limited amount of moves is Grass Psychic. Okay, last but not least, the ability. There are a couple of abilities that are just straight up bad, like Defeatist and Slow Start, but I think that the worst ability all around is Truant. Truant makes it so the user skips every other turn instead of using a move. So basically, if your opponent has Protect, you're screwed. Alright, on to the strategy. First, Durant is going to use Entrainment on Blipbug, giving it Truant. Then Smeargle is going to use Magic Powder and Forest Curse on Blipbug, making it a Psychic Grass type. After that, Smeargle is going to use Speed Swap on Shuckle and then on Blipbug, giving it Shuckle's base speed. And finally, Shuckle and Igglybuff are both going to spam Guard Split and Power Split on Blipbug respectively, until Blipbug basically has their horrible base stats. Now, Igglybuff can't actually learn Guard Split, so instead Smeargle has to use Guard Split, and then Igglybuff uses Mimic on the Smeargle, making it so Igglybuff can now use Guard Split on Blipbug. So, like I said earlier, after like 9 or 10 Guard Splits, Blipbug is basically gonna have the same base stats as Shuckle and Igglybuff. So yeah, then you're done. This Blipbug here is, at least as I consider it, the worst Pokemon of all time. It has the worst ability in the game, Truant, and it also has these base stats. It learns 5 moves, and it also has one of the worst typings in the game in Grass Psychic. Very cool. Alright, yeah, that's the video. If you enjoyed it, then leave a like. If you want to see more informative Pokemon content like this, then consider subscribing and, ringing that bell so you know when I next upload. And yeah, I'll see you next time.